Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us today. It's really lovely to actually be able to start doing some of these webinars again that are customer only. The purpose of the webinars you will have seen from the e-shot and the update in the WhatsApp group is to give you all an update on some of the most pertinent changes to the legislation, things that you need to be thinking about now rather than waiting till spring when the new merge scheme comes in and all the transition schemes that we've got to navigate over the next couple of years. Also, we wanted to take the opportunity, because there have been quite a lot of things going on in the background of the app, to give you a full picture of the recent updates that we've made to the app. And of course, we've got time set aside for a live Q&A at the end. So if anybody's got any questions that they'd like to ask, that would be fantastic. So Jen's going to kick us off with an update on the legislation. Jen and I will then both be doing some demos within the app. I'll be looking at the admin side and Jen's going to look at the front-facing side of things. And just before we get going, we've pulled together for the features update kind of all the updates we've made in the last 6 months. And we do share product updates every few months. I'll show you where you can find them when I get to my bit. And we do share them in our newsletter, and you can also see them within the app as well. But we also do understand that many of you may not necessarily see the emails that pop into your inbox or have time to read them in full, because we know you're all very busy. So it would be great if either during the session or at any point afterwards, you drop us a message on live chat or an email, or give us a call to get some feedback on whether you are aware of the updates that we've made from the demo today, and if anybody has any feedback about how best we can communicate these changes better, whether it be there's a different channel that you'd like us to use, or if it's simply that you'd like us to do more of these types of sessions that we're running today in person. So do let us know, but I will hand over to Jen to get us going on the scheme updates just now.
Oh, thanks, Suze. And I just want to say a quick hello to Louise, who is on the call, who requested this webinar in the first place. So excellent idea. Thanks for that. So I'm going to do quite quickly, because I have done this webinar many, many times now. I know we've got people on the call who even seen me do it in person. So I won't dwell too much, but just to make sure, mostly for context around, so obviously quite a lot of the changes we've made recently have been because of legislative changes. So just make sure everyone understands the context of why all of our changes have been done. So first of all, looking back at 2023, which is scarily long ago now. First change that hit in 2023 was the change in enhancement rates. So that was for expenditure incurred after the 1st of April 2023. And I know this is something I get a lot of questions about. A lot of those claims that straddle 1st April 23 and are in both enhancement rate periods are coming through, and I know it's a pain in the neck. So we're doing our best to kind of help you with that. So the change in enhancement rate was the SME enhancement rate went from 130% to 86%, so a massive decrease, and the RDIC went from 13% to 20%. What I used to say was this is probably because they're going to merge the schemes, and now I can say for sure the whole sort of driver for changing those rates was to bring the two schemes together in advance of the merge scheme. And obviously the tax credit rate for SMEs went down from 14.5% to 10%, and then we had that little last minute, but you can have an R&D intensive rate for SMEs that do a lot of R&D, and that stayed at 14.5%. So quite a lot of changes there, which are just kind of washing through actually in claims at the moment. I think people are really have kind of got to grips with that so far, which is good. Then for claim periods starting on or after the 1st of April 23, so these are for claims we really are starting to see wash through now. Obviously, the tax deadline for these claim periods is quickly approaching. Small differences, pure maths is now allowed. So as I always say, there's about 7 companies in the country that will benefit from that. But you can also include data licenses and cloud computing service costs for the first time. So that's really good. So that should increase the tax benefit for quite a lot of companies. But the main thing is pre-notification is required for some claims starting on or after 1st April. So we saw a huge number of questions, queries, worries about that in September as that kind of 6 months after the end of the claim period hit. And again, this is something that is going to be a problem over the next couple of years as everyone gets used to the need for pre-notification. Biggest change, though, in 2023 was obviously the introduction of the additional information form. So we've now had this for about 15 months. And as everyone, I hope, on this call knows, This is something you have to do before the CT 600. It's the first time HMRC have mandated supporting and documentation for an R&D claim. So you've got to do a minimum number of product descriptions, detailed cost breakdowns, and generally just give them a huge amount of information about the claim. Last August, 50% of claims were rejected on the basis they didn't have an AIF. I haven't heard, other than glitches from HMRC's side, I haven't heard of anyone recently that has had something rejected because they didn't realise they needed an AIF. So that has become kind of business as usual for everyone now. But then, of course, we've got a whole load of new changes that come in this year. So for claim periods starting on or after the 1st April 2024, they will all be claimed through the merged RDEC scheme. So obviously, we have lots of arguments in-house and with other people in the sector about the fact that HMRC have decided to call this RDEC rather than something new. But the merged RDEC scheme does come in for claims on or after 1st April 2024. So we haven't seen any of these claims through yet. The app can't currently actually do these claims. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but we're working on that for now. Key things here, it gives an expenditure credit of 20% in the same way that the current RDEC does. It uses the current SME PAYE NIC cap rules, and it brings the tax benefit down to about 15% for profitable companies and 16.2% for loss-making companies, regardless of their size. The enhanced R&D intensive scheme replaces the R&D intensive scheme, but to all intents and purposes, they are the same. There's one slight tweak where you can claim as an R&D intensive SME if you're loss making after the R&D is applied. You have to be loss making before the R&D is applied to claim through ERIS. So the major change to the way you would prepare claims, subcontractor costs are now allowed for everyone, including large companies. And the way that HMRC look at subcontractor arrangements has changed slightly. So they're now looking at whatever company initiated the R&D is all about whether the company paying for whatever it is to be delivered was aware that R&D needed to take place, intended for it to take place. So again, there's lots of wording around that. But I think what we are going to see is a shift in benefit from SMEs that claimed entirely through RDEC on the basis they were acting for large companies. All of those costs will now go through the large companies, through the merge scheme. So we are going to see a shift in the kind of where the benefit sits. The expected ban in overseas subcontract and EPW costs does come in with the merge scheme. There's quite a lot of exemptions to that, but in general, again, one of the conversations you need to be having with your clients now is making sure they understand that they may not be able to claim for overseas subcontract and EPW costs going forward, and that may change the way they do their business, they do their R&D, they pay for things. And grants and subsidies no longer affect claims. So any company that's had any kind of grant or any kind of subsidy for their R&D no longer has to worry about splitting that off or how those projects are affected. So loads of changes, and we've obviously had to make loads and loads of changes in the app to account for this. So I'm going to hand back to Suze just to go through the kind of, as she said, the admin side of things.
I'm on mute. There. Thanks, Jen. Right, let me just share my screen.
While you're doing that, Suze, I can see Stephen's asked a question about EPWs. So for EPWs, you cannot have EPWs that are based overseas that are not paid through UK PAYE. So to flip that on its head, as long as the EPW, regardless of where they are in the world, is paid through UK PAYE, you can include them. There are exceptions around if as HMRC would put it, the conditions required for the R&D don't exist in the UK, you can still use overseas EPWs. The example they gave initially was if you're doing volcanic research and there are no active volcanoes in the UK, it would be okay to pay people to do that overseas. But the key thing for EPWs is around whether they're paid through UK PAYE. And if they are, it doesn't really matter if they're sitting in the Ukraine, in Ireland, anywhere in the world, as long as they're paid through UK PAYE. So it's a wee bit complicated. Sorry, Suze, I'll hand back to you.
Fantastic, great question. Thank you, Stephen. Okay, so just in light of what I said at the top of the session, I just wanted to point out where you can find things like product updates. So on our website, we've got our insights section, which is split into these beautiful categories here, and you've got your product updates all available here, which, as I said, we send out as and when we've got something to talk about, something to tell you about. When you're in the app, you also get an update of the most recent blog articles that we're pushing out. So you will be able to see them here at various points. And as I also said, you get them in the newsletter as well. So if there's any other way that we can best explain and convey things like this, please do let us know, because it's really helpful for us to make sure that you're always up to date and know where to look for things as well. So the first thing that I'm going to touch on in my part, as I said, is going to focus on the admin side, is two-factor authentication. So anybody who's using the app regularly will have been aware of this. We rolled this out earlier on in the year as we continue to prioritize security for you and your clients' data. And the only really thing to say here is that you have the option to change the way that your verification codes are sent to you. So you can either have them sent to your email or your mobile. I have to say mine will come to my mobile. I find that the most efficient way to capture them, and they do come through really, really quickly. If you or another seat on the license has maybe been locked out and they need their 2FA reset, all you need to do is just get in touch with us and we can do that for you. Obviously, if you're locked out of your account, you'll not be able to access the app and our live chats and help section from here, but you can obviously email us at support@whisperclaims.co.uk, email Jen or myself directly if you can remember the email address, or head over to the main website. Here you do have a live chat button on the main website as well that goes through to our sales team, so you will still be able to get through to us. It just might take a tiny weeny bit longer, but you still got the availability to do that there. Another thing that I wanted to show you is claim unlocking. So this is something that used to have to be done by us, but we've now given you the opportunity to be able to unlock claims yourself. So you no longer have to come through us and wait for us to unlock the claim. It's all instant. So if you're in your workflow dashboard and you've got a claim that has been completed, here is an example. All you need to do is navigate to the three dots on the left-hand side of the screen. You'll see you've got an unlock button. If I click unlock, that will just simply allow me to unlock the button rather than having a message sent through to us in support and getting us to do it. So you've now got instant access back into your client's claim. We all know that, many of our customers go through several review processes with their clients, which is obviously really important. So you can now unlock, re-download as many times as you need to until you feel that your documentation is fit for submission. Importantly, and I'm sure you all know this, but just to really, really double down on it, as you'll be aware, the report and the additional information form files will both update to reflect the changes that you've made, which makes life much easier for you, knowing that the most up-to-date versions of your documents are all available in one place and being updated instantaneously. The next thing that I want to touch on briefly is collaborators. So we've made some changes again, and this is directly from feedback from our customers as to how collaborators are managed within the app, just making it really, really easy for you to have some more control over this. So if you have a client who you've invited as a collaborator from within the question set, but they've let you know that they've not received their invite or they can't find it, first of all, it's always worth asking them to check their spam or junk folders, because sometimes these emails can find their way into there. If it's not there, this is an example of a collaborator that's telling me that they haven't received their email, but I can see that they've been invited. Again, all you need to do is come into the collaborator section, click on the three dots on the left-hand side, and you now have the ability to resend that invitation to your collaborator, which should hopefully sort the problem out. In the rare event that you resend the invite link and it doesn't work, there may be a problem with spam and junk filters, things like that. Certain addresses, like we've had issues with things like sky.com addresses, some Gmail and Hotmail addresses sometimes can be marked as unfriendly and are therefore blocked. And we'll likely be able to identify what the issue is our end and help you resolve the problem with your clients. So do get in touch if that's ever the case. If a collaborator has been working on a claim with you and they've got to the end of the process and they've clicked the submit button, so they've submitted their data to you, you've received an email to say that your collaborator has finished the data inputting that you've asked them to do, and then you're going into review, and for whatever reason your client then needs back into the claim. Maybe you've gone through a review process, review cycle, and there's some changes that you want them to make, or there's something that you need them to review. Again, previously this was a bit of a sticky situation. and you needed to get in touch with us to help give that collaborator access back. Now you have control of that as well. So as you can see, I've got an example of Mike here. I can see that my collaborator has submitted their data, and if I need them to be able to get back into the claim, all I need to do is click on the unsubmit claim button here, which will then give that collaborator access back into the question sets. There's one thing that's worth mentioning when you're in this situation of you've gone through to review, maybe you've already downloaded a report and now you need your collaborator to have access back into a claim. So I'm just trying to find the tab that I thought I had a claim prepared on, but I don't. So let me just go back into a claim just to show you. Your claim does need to be sat in progress. So if you have a claim, let's use this one as an example. It's not a great example. If you have a claim, that's not another great example. This is not going well. I'm so sorry. There we go. So if you've got a claim where you've been in review, so you're reviewing the review screen.
It'll be fine.
Just hanging a little bit because we're on Zoom and the app takes a long time to come through. Let me just try and refresh that there. There we go, the review screen. And you want your collaborator to be able to go back in. If you're sat on this page, the collaborator will, you won't be able to see that functionality. So what you need to remember to do is to click edit claim, which will put the claim back in progress and will mean that you can then expose your client back into the question set to enable them to make updates and amendments, as I've just said there. Another thing that I'd just like to quickly talk to you about is managing payments within the app. So sometimes customers, or as we all know, maybe cards expire or customers want to change from paying from cards to DD or DD to cards. We've deployed a new feature to enable customers to, again, directly take control of that yourself and make the ability for you to manage payment preferences within the app something that's open to you. So again, if I just go into the account section here, and I go to the subscription tab just on your left-hand side here and click on manage billing, that will then show you the screen again. Sorry, this is going to hang a sec just because we're going through Zoom and the app's just taking a moment to catch up. There we go. You'll see the screen. So here you will be able to, as I said, view any current cards that you have available. You can set defaults for your preferred payment preference. You can also add payment methods here, as I've said. So if you want to switch from, just popping up now, from card to DD or vice versa, you can do that within the app as well. And you can also view all of your invoice history from this area as well. One thing that Jen asked me to mention is if anybody on the call today, and I think we have a couple of people on the call today, finds that they do not have access to this area, that is because, congratulations, you're one of our oldest customers and you're still set up on one of our legacy payment gateways, Go Cardless. If you'd like to have access to be able to manage this yourself in the background, we'd very much like to offer you this visibility and flexibility. So do get in touch after today and we'll port you over to Stripe where this will all be available to you. That was everything from me, Jen, for the minute, before we've got some other things later on. I'll pass back to you.
Cool. Okay, so Suze has done the admin stuff. I'm going to now try and remain coherent whilst describing to you all the changes we've made for the different kind of technical bits of things. So I apologize if I lose the thread slightly. It's because there's a lot of kind of interlinked aspects to this. Can you see my screen right, Suze? Cool. So there's a few things I can just show you in one question, and we'll talk about why those questions have been put in. The threads that we'll be kind of pulling through several different questions is the ability to work out whether a claim is R&D intensive, to be able to calculate tax benefit and to work out the PAYE NIC cap. So those pull from lots of different areas. We've had to add little bits to different questions. So that's why if I lose the threads, that's where I'm trying to get to, is to show you at the end the beauty of our background calculations section and the AIF output that includes all of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click through a claim that I've hopefully set up with everything I need to be able to show you everything that is important. And I'll just pause at the places where there have been changes and explain what they are and why they're there. So just starting at the very beginning. One thing just for here in the date section, we just put in a wee note to say that at the moment you cannot add claims for periods for claim periods starting on after 1st April 2024. The changes for the merge scheme are so big that if you start a claim, which you shouldn't do, obviously these claim periods haven't really finished, and this shouldn't ever matter because we should have it all done before the end of March. But just to say you can't put them in because we can't right now map across the inputs for this to the merge scheme. It would just be a mess. So we're just kind of making sure that nobody puts in any claims that they then have to rework later. Okay, so first big new question is the claim notification question. So this is really just checking before you go any further through the claim, because as everyone that uses this knows, one of our big one of the things we try to make sure we do with the design of the app is make sure nobody answers any more questions than they have to. And obviously, if a claim cannot be submitted, we don't ever want to take your money or have you waste an hour or so filling stuff out. So this is really just checking that you've done what you need to do for claims that need pre-notification. So the first question is, did the claimant company submit an R&D tax relief claim in the notification period? So that's it's 3 years from the end of the notification period, which is 6 months after the end of the claim period, which is why we've put those specific dates there for you, because anything else was too confusing. There's a wee note there about the annoyance of the claims starting before 1st April 2023, submitted as an amendment on or after that date. You have to ignore them. So if that's the only one they've got in that period, you'd have to say no to this question. And then we obviously check whether the claimant company did a pre-notification before the end of the notification period. So if you say no to both of those, we'll tell you that you just can't submit the claim. HMRC won't accept it. If you say yes to either, then you'll be able to proceed. So I think that one's pretty straightforward. We're just making sure that the notification was done in the right period, in the right way for that particular claim. Unfortunately, obviously, we don't know about claims until you add them into the app. So we can't right now, and we're thinking about this as kind of future development, indicate when you need to pre-notify for claims, because if you don't add it till the notification window is closed, there's nothing we can do for that. So we're kind of thinking about ways to help you manage notification. But for now, all we can do is make sure that it was done and that you don't pay for claims that can't be submitted. Okay, so now we're in this used to just have revenue and balance sheet, and all we ever used that for was calculating whether the company was an SME or a large company, because obviously there are revenue and balance sheet limits on being an SME. So what we have had to add here, so total trading and operating expenses has been put there because that forms part of the R&D intensive calculation. So obviously the R&D intensive calculation is what proportion of the total trading and operating expenses is represented by the R&D eligible expenditure. So we need that number to be able to tell you whether you're R&D intensive. The total capitalized R&D expenditure, again, forms part of the R&D intensive calculation. And then the profit loss before R&D claim figure helps us with both the R&D intensive calculation, and we need that to do this is where I'm trying to remember what happens. I think we also use that for the PAYE cap. I'll get there, but anyway, it does hit several. Oh, it's the tax benefit calculation. Sorry, that the profit loss position helps us calculate. So those 3 figures there are used for kind of background calculations. Some of it goes into the AIF. Everything goes into the background calculation section, so you can see our logic and how we've come to things. But there is a purpose to all of that, because I know I've had people going, why on earth am I suddenly having to do this? And I realized that because of the way we release, it can be you're halfway through a claim and suddenly this requirement pops up. But that's what those 3 are for. Now, I think I've got a wee bit of a break till there's anything new. Okay, so moving on to the SME status question. This question used to just ask whether the company was part of a group, and it was a yes/no question. We've added in a question about having any connected companies, again, because it's closely enough linked to be looking at company structure and answering this question. So it seemed a logical place to put this one. We need to know about connected companies because that affects the R&D intensive calculation. So I'm leaving this one on yes, because it means we ask further questions. If the answer is no, you can ask no, and then you can answer no, and then nothing else will happen. There'll be no other questions pop up. But the key thing here is, sorry, I got distracted by a question that someone's asked. The key thing here is that that is for the R&D intensive calculation, and that is really important. If they do have any connected companies, that you say yes to that and you give the further information. Fiona's asked about the profit and loss figure is after tax adjustments. And I know Fiona's asked me this, and I know I should know this because I looked it up last week when Fiona asked me this and I can't remember. So leave it with me, and in the follow-up, we'll put something in around that. But I will make a note. So funny the things that you just cannot keep in your head. Okay, so that's the why we're asking about connected companies there. And now I think we can click through. I'm going to click forward because I will forget exactly where questions are. But in general, this stuff is all exactly as it's always been. So everything here should be familiar to everybody. I'm going to keep clicking because I'm still, yep, these are all fine. Okay, so where there is a little bit of a difference is in the activity section. So you'll all be aware of this question that asks about what percentage of the work was made up of activities that directly contribute to the R&D. So that one is as it was when we brought it in last August for the AIF. But we now have, and this has only been in for a week or so, a question that asks where the R&D activity took place during the claim period. So whether it was all in the UK, all overseas, or both the UK and overseas. As you can see in the description at the top there, this has no effect whatsoever on your claims for R&D tax relief for the periods before the 1st of April 24. But it's in the AIF. I will try to swallow down my rant about HMRC clearly by accident released things they didn't mean to release into the current version of the AIF, and it shouldn't be there. However, it's a question that's asked. It's probably a good practice to start asking these kind of questions of your client, even in current claims, because it will affect future claims. So all you need to know for now is whether any of the R&D, so done by staff, EPW, subcontractors, anyone, was done overseas. And that's it. It doesn't affect anything else other than the AIF output, just states that. It will obviously become important in the merge scheme app and AIF. Okay. And I think, okay. So we now have a few changes that are actually in the cost section. So the first one is looking for the PAYE employer and employee NIC liabilities for the claim period. So this does affect the PAYE NIC cap. So obviously the PAYE NIC cap is £20,000 plus 3 times the total PAYE employer and employee NIC liabilities for the claim period. We have to ask you this. There's no way we can calculate that from anything you put in anywhere else, because obviously we can't see underneath the staff costs really. So we just ask you for that, and that just directly goes into the PAYE NIC cap calculation. And again, it's in the staff cost section because you're looking at staff costs at the point you're filling that out. So this felt like a logical place to put that. So moving on. So I'm just checking my notes to make sure I've covered everything. I'm going to jump forward because I'm pretty sure that the next change is in the EPW section. So this again, suppressing my rant, is something that is currently asked for in the AIF, but doesn't actually affect your claim. So anyone that's done an AIF with EPWs will know that they do ask for where the EPWs were they in the UK or overseas, and for a PAYE reference for those UK-based EPWs. It doesn't affect the claim whatsoever. I don't know. I haven't seen anything around this, whether HMRC validate that PAYE reference. I've put in any old number and it accepts it, but whether there's any background checking of whether that is a valid PAYE reference, I don't know. But basically, we have added this in because, again, it means that our AIF output is complete and covers everything that you need. And also because, again, this is going to be important for future claims. So we felt like bringing it in now was better than not doing this, having an incomplete AIF output, and then suddenly asking for this next year. So this only went in a couple of days ago, so I don't imagine many people have seen it yet. You can, as you can see there, put in just zeros if you need to be able to proceed. If you say that the EPW is overseas, you don't need a P reference at all. It'll let you proceed because that's how the AIF is currently set up. But again, we're kind of looking to the future and making sure that we're asking for everything needed for now and for in the merge scheme. Okay, I think, yeah. So the next thing to think about is, as I foreshadowed earlier, if a company looks like they're R&D intensive, so we only ask you these questions if a company was never going to get a tax credit or is way off in terms of meeting the criteria in terms of percentage of overall spends versus R&D, whatever it is, we won't bother asking this question because they haven't met the criteria. However, if they look like they should be R&D intensive, we need to double check that by checking the connected companies. So we asked earlier whether there were any, because we said yes, this is now going to ask how many connected companies the claimant company had. And then we need to ask for additional information about that. So you do have the option here of saying, look, I can't get this information. And I'm aware that means I can't make a claim through the R&D intensive scheme. So that comes from HMRC. If you can't give this information about connected companies, you cannot claim through the R&D intensive scheme. They just won't let you. So that's a conversation for you and your client. I know from personal experience that connected companies can be very tenuously connected, and the other party might not want to release information to you for the purposes of your R&D claim. So it might be difficult. But if you can get it, what we need from you is the name of the connected company, where they're registered, the registration number of that company, if you can get it. That is not mandatory because obviously if a company is registered in Uzbekistan, you might not be able to access that country's registration numbers. We ask whether they're chargeable to UK corporation tax, and then we ask for the qualifying R&D expenditure, their trading and operating expenses, and their capitalised R&D expenditure. And as I hope everyone knows, what we then do with that is we take the R&D expenditure, we add it to the R&D expenditure of the claimant company, we add on the trading and operating expenses of the connected companies, and we just check that they still meet the criteria. This is part of the rules because obviously what HMRC don't want companies or groups of connected companies doing is throwing all of the R&D through one company, artificially reducing its trading and operating expenses so that it always meets the criteria. You've got to be looking at it as kind of a group as a whole. So again, we're asking that question because we have to, because it feeds into other things and because HMRC needs it for the AIF. And then, yep. So the last thing is the PAYE cap exemption question. So again, this will only appear if the claim is likely to be affected by the PAYE cap. So that means that the potential credit they could get is higher than the capped amount. So you only see it in that situation. So if, for example, they're massively profit making and they're never going to get an R&D tax credit, we wouldn't bother asking this question. Or if the tax credit is really small and the cap is really big, the capped amount is really big. So if the maximum they could get is 100k and it looks like the credit would be about 20k, again, we won't bother asking this question because it's irrelevant to that particular claim. But in the circumstances where the claim might be affected by the cap, we ask you about the conditions that would mean a company was exempt from that cap. So that's checking whether R&D activities were carried out wholly or mainly by employees of the claimant company rather than EPWs or contractors, and then whether they carried out a significant amount of management activity related to the IP that the company owns. And that's just 2 yes, no's. 1 yes to either of them means that you're exempt. There is another exemption criteria that we can calculate ourselves, which is around the amount of connected subcontractor and connected DPW costs. But we work that one out ourselves. And again, only if it meets that criteria, we do see this question. So this is the only additional information that we need from you. So I think that's all the changes in the question sets. So just to show where some of these are reflected in the review screen to start with, you can see now that we have an R&D intensive status section in the review screen. And that'll be a yes or no. And it just tells you about the trading and operating expenses that you've put in, and you've got a yes or no. And then you've got a PAYE NIC cap status. So that will show either unaffected. So those claims where it doesn't matter if you're exempt or not, the capped amount is so high, it doesn't matter. Capped if they're not exempt and the potential credit is much higher than the capped amount, or exempt if they've turned out exempt, as I showed you in those questions. So just showing you where you are with that. And we also now have an approximate tax benefit here. And I will say, as always, heavily caveated with, we don't know everything that's going on. I did have a client, I think might be on this call, ask me the other week about whether certain adjustments to the profit loss figure would affect this. And my answer is always, if an accountant has worked this out and knows what they're doing, if it's a little bit different to ours, that's probably because of changes that we can't take account of in what we're doing. Our figures are always approximate because we don't know about, even if it's to do with group relief, anything like that, we don't know about that. We can just do the sort of the purest form of the calculation and give you that number. But yeah, so we now have, as I say, alongside the approximate qualifying expenditure, we've got the approximate tax benefit. So that is all the changes that have happened in the app. So I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm just going to jump into an AIF output quickly just to show you how we've then reflected that in the AIF output. Okay, can you see that one, Suze? Cool. Okay, so there's been a few little tweaks here. HMRC, in a kind of unannounced way, did change some of the headings, which a couple of people pointed out to us. So we have updated the heading. So right now, and I did do this when I was testing something the day, everything we have here is exactly as the AIF needs it to be for now. There'll be more changes that will come in that mean we have to do other things. So section 1 is exactly as it's always been. Section 2, exactly as it's always been. Again, with section 3. What you have now in the qualifying expenditure section, we've got an answer to the does all the qualifying expenditure relate to R&D activity in the UK question. So that's just a yes, no. And again, it doesn't affect the claim in any way. We've now got a section that answers the question, are you claiming the business is exempt from the PAYE cap? So we give you a yes, no, and then the AIF follows that up with why is it exempt? And we've got a little bit of automatically generated content for you there that you can just copy and paste in. We've got, so how you put in the project obviously is exactly the same, but after that, it does ask, do you have any EPWs in your project? How many? Are any of them based in the UK? And do you have PAYE scheme references? So again, we're just answering all of those questions. We used to have a little bit of just boilerplate there going, there's some questions we can't cover yet. We are now covering every single question that the AIF asks. But kind of bit that I like more actually is, so after you get to the end of what you need, so that's the answering the questions about the R&D intensive, which I think people will have seen, but again, that just walks you through the R&D intensive section. We've actually now got a background calculation section. So this is, you can double check our numbers. We're confident that they're right, but again, you might have other things. And it also just helps you understand how we've come to those conclusions, because what we don't want to do is just say, yes, absolutely, your company is R&D intensive without giving you the backup to kind of work through that. So you can see here, it just lays out all the figures we use. So what the profit loss position was, what was pre and post R&D, were they an SME, what were the trading and operating expenses, all of that kind of thing. And it just works through to give you that kind of final yes, no, and it gives you the percentage as well of R&D expenditure to trading expenses. So again, just so that you've got the logic of how we got to where we got to with that one. And again, on the tax benefit, so we're just putting in a breakdown of all the figures that we've gone through to get to the tax credit we were given, including allowing for whether they're R&D intensive or not. So obviously we'll use the 14.5% if we think they're R&D intensive, we'll use the 10% if they're not. So that gives you a really good breakdown of the tax benefit calculation. And then we've also got the PAYE NIC cap exemption. So saying that the maximum credit available, so that's the 3 times the NIC PAYE liabilities plus £20,000. And we're saying with a calculated credit is £38,000. So obviously this one would be capped. But then we're saying, okay, here's your answers and you're exempt. So you can see why the total tax benefit here is that amount and not that amount. If anyone wants us to tweak the layout of these, there's been a wee bit of debate in-house about how do we lay these out and how they're displayed. Please let us know. We're trying to make it as easy for you as possible in the way that we show things. But this is just in the spirit of kind of openness, collaboration, and also just it's not laziness on my part, but I'd rather give you these figures than have you go, this figure doesn't make sense to me. How did you get there? Because then we can have a much more informed conversation. If you say, actually, the way that's calculated doesn't make sense to me, I don't think this figure is quite right. We can have a conversation. Whereas, and it's all done. So it means that we can have that conversation quickly rather than me having to go back, do all my calculations and then have the conversation with you. So it's to help us support you as well as best we can as well. So that is in all AIF outputs now, and we'll just keep working through it. I am going to go, hopefully, back to the slides now. Please throw in any questions you have about any of that while I work out how to get the slides to show again. Okay. Has that pop back up, Suze? Cool. So there's a few more changes that you actually can't see and we can't demo for you. The key one on those is we have taken away your choice of how to prepare claims. So anyone that's been around long enough knows you used to be able to choose to prepare narrative only claims, so put in no costs whatsoever. You used to be able to do the costs in a different way where you didn't have to divide the costs project by project. And then we had the project by project costs section. We have taken away the ability to do them without costs because obviously with the AIF and everything, it doesn't feel good value to anyone to not be using our costs engine. And it just affects everything we can do. It means there's way less information we can give you back if we don't have the costs. And we've taken away the top down. We wanted to remove it last year when we did the AIF work to do it project by project. We left it in so that people could finish up the claims they had been working on, as we didn't want to force people to do things in a different way. But it's a way less accurate way to do the costs, especially what it meant was we had to make a lot of assumptions in our calculations, and we didn't like that when everything is out in the open in the AIF, and we'd much rather people were doing it in the most accurate way for the AIF now. So that's gone away. In the background for us, Sue showed you that you can now manage your own costs. We've done a lot on our end as well about managing payments and costs and making that easier. So anyone that misses a payment, so if your card expires, what you'll now find is if you log in, you'll have a big banner that tells you this, and you'll be blocked from downloading any claims until we've got a valid payment method, purely because if you try and download claims without a valid payment method, we like to be paid for the claims, but mostly because things will fall over, things will break. It doesn't work for you if you don't have a valid payment method. You don't want to be clicking constantly trying to work out why your claim isn't downloading. So you have a big banner. You can keep working on your claims, but we do need a valid payment method for you to be able to download reports. So we've got a wee bit more control of that, a wee bit more visibility, which is helping us manage our credit control better, which is good. I think overall there's a general push to give you more control and access. So Sue's showed you some of the things. We're thinking about other ways of kind of giving you more control over what you're doing. We're probably going to rearrange the collaborator. So all that functionality Sue's just showed you about collaborators will remain, but we're just going to put it in a slightly different place to make it easier to use. And as I showed when I was going through it, you can't add claims starting after the 1st of April 2024, purely because the new app is going to be so different. There just wouldn't be any way to take a claim that you'd started and make it work in the new app. So we'd rather you didn't do that at all. So that's where we are right now as things stand. Obviously, so we talked about what the merge scheme means from a legislation and claim point of view. From an app point of view, there's masses of changes we need to do. Some of those are driven by the legislation itself. Some of it's driven by the merge scheme AIF, which came out in September, I think, was released then. So over and above the kind of legislative changes, or not over and above, we've been waiting to see how HMRC was going to translate those legislative changes into what they actually asked for in the AIF before we did the work. So we're there now and we're working on it. Key things are that they are looking for additional details about subcontractors and EPWs. So over and above what we showed you for EPWs, they're going to look for registered country for subcontractors. They're looking for company registration numbers. So everything I showed you for the connected company section will come in for subcontractors. They want to know whether the work is carried out in the UK overseas, as we've discussed. But they're also going to need reasons for the exemption to the overseas restriction. So if you believe that the company, the project, whichever, is exempt to those restrictions, then there'll need to be a little bit of adding, a little bit of narrative that HMRC want to see for that. Oddly, and I have asked a few people this, and we don't really know why, in the new AIF, the ERIS and the merged scheme RDEC are treated as two separate schemes, which means that for anyone that's done a scheme that's SME and RDEC, it's very similar to that. You've got to say how much staff cost was ERIS, how much staff cost was RDEC, how much was this. For each project, you've got to say whether they were ERIS and RDEC or both, and how much cost was in each. So we, within the app, are going to have to work out how to help you split the cost, because it's fairly, compared to, obviously the rules were different for SME and RDEC are different. So there's a reason to have them separated out. Here, it's a fairly arbitrary thing, whether you decide to claim through ERIS or RDEC. So we're working on that. And then there's quite a lot you'll need to do for companies with a registered address in Northern Ireland. So there's additional questions just about their location, whether they, most claimant companies don't need to put in a registered address, but for Northern Irish companies, they do. And then there's questions around having claimed before, how much they've claimed, because there's a rolling limit to how much Northern Irish companies can claim through ERIS. So within the AIF, there's quite a lot of additional information that we weren't necessarily expecting. So what are we going to do to react to this? So there are some unneeded questions. There will be a simplification in some places. So we can take away the grant section, we're taking away the independent research. We are reducing the number of questions we ask about the acting, whether companies are acting as a subcontractor, because there's just fewer things we need to know. So there is a reduction in some sections. We're doing some quite in-depth updates to the EPW and subcon costs sections. So as you saw, we already asked about location of EPWs. We're going to have to add that in about subcons, and we need to add in some questions about the exemptions to overseas rules and why you think the company would be exempt. The costs will be updated mostly to take away that RDEC SME split and then put in a split across RDEC and ERIS. But the difference here is that we can't dictate that split for you. So we'll need to ask questions about how you want to split that. So it'll be a bit of a different dynamic, I guess, between you and the app. It can't do it for you because there's nothing within the claim itself or the costs that dictate whether it should be RDEC or ERIS. If it qualifies for both schemes, everything could go through one or the other. So it's up to you and your clients about how you want to do that. So we're adding that in. Obviously, we're adding in some questions about Northern Irish companies. We're going to see whether we can automatically detect when a company's added, whether they're Northern Irish. It looks like we can, based just on SIC code. So we need to ask about benefit from previous ERIS claims and some exemption questions in there. So that'll be added in. But again, you'll only see those if it's a company based in Northern Ireland. And as a final part of all this, clearly all of our outputs will need to be refreshed. So the review screen is going to look different. The AIF will obviously reflect the new AIF structure. We're going to update the report just to make sure there'll be sections we don't need about grants. There'll be other things we want to add in and make sure it's still coherent and good. I think that's all of our outputs. I'm trying to think if we have another output, but yeah, the review screen, the report, and the AIF will all be very, very different come hopefully about March. And then, and this is just to drop this in because we're probably going to be asking some of you for your input on where we go from there. So having done all of the merge scheme stuff, we can then start actually doing things that are based on your requests again, rather than the requirements of HMRC. So things we are looking at, obviously there are AI tools for R&D claims out there. We're looking at whether we could add that to the app, how people feel about that, whether that's something that's worthwhile adding in. Looking at whether we can add in better claim management tools. So helping you with the more of the lifestyle of a claim, kind of recording all that, whether we look at analytics and audit trails, and whether we look at file uploads, because I think as people, the way that inquiries are going, there's fewer of them, but they're definitely more in depth, and maybe having all the files uploaded to one place would be helpful for that. So we're going to be kind of reaching out to some of our users over the next month or so and just having that conversation about where you would like us to take it, what's of value to you, and what would help you out in your day-to-day. So before we get to any questions, I'm going to pass back to Suze for a moment.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, please do, don't be shy with your questions. And we are willing to, we've never done this before, so it'll be a bit new to us, but if anybody does want to raise their hands and would rather talk, we'll see if we can open up your mics and you can talk to us rather than have to sit and type questions. But have a little think if there's anything that you'd like to ask while you've got the opportunity in this forum here. We just thought we'd take the opportunity while we've got a lot of you here in one place, just to remind you of our different pricing options. Just looking at the list of everyone who is here today, I know that many of you are on our core pricing model. So just a reminder of that, you've got your monthly subscription, £100 plus VAT per month, and you've got your CAT fee download, which is based on 2% of the overall qualifying spend. So you'll never pay more than £625 for a report download, but you could pay less if you've got really small claims. You'll pay under the cap. Some of you may have heard us in the past talk about an enterprise pricing option. We developed that about a year ago now, where we were trying to help our sort of heavier, sort of higher volume users to essentially smooth out their costs over the year and not get hit with big spikes in the usual December and March periods with huge numbers of downloads. And what that looked like was essentially us smooshing together, technical term there, smooshing together our subscription fee and our report fee into one monthly fee based on a predicted forecast of how many claims you expect to do over the 12-month period. We've recently changed our approach to this and introduced an option for smaller volume customers as well, because we feel that this would be beneficial to our smaller clients too. And this model is now called Smart Save. So again, this just might be another term that you've heard us talk about. So Smart Save essentially replaces Enterprise. We're no longer trying to focus that type of billing cycle on just our big clients who want to open it up to everybody. And just to give you an example, as you can see on the screen there, if you're preparing around 5 claims per year, what the sub plus report download fee will look like for you is paying £229 plus VAT per month as a fixed fee over the year. And just to be really, really clear, you get access to all of the same help and support regardless of which package you're on. The benefit of Smart Save, though, is that you get a discount. The more claims you're doing, the bigger the discounts available. So, for example, if you're doing 10 claims per year, your monthly fee will look like £399 per month. If you're doing 15 claims per year, it's £549 per month plus VAT. That just gives you a flavour of the level of discount that you can achieve and how we can, as I said, help you smooth your cash flow over the year. We've already got some of our smaller customers opting to switch over from core to Smart Save, and actually our newest cohort of customers over the last few months have all gone straight onto Smart Save. So it does seem to be really adding value to our customers and the sub. So if you like the sound of this, you find it might be interesting, please reach out and we can have a chat and talk about where you think you're going to be in the next 12 months and see if we can come up with some additional value for you there to take advantage of some discounts if you want to switch over to that methodology of payment. I think we've got, yeah, just again, a reminder to anybody. I think everyone who's on the call today is already in the group, but just a reminder that we do have a customer-only WhatsApp group as well. It's a really safe space for anybody, any of our customers to ask questions, to seek help and advice. Generally speaking, it's there for we do moderate the group, but it's there for our customers to kind of talk to each other and share things like real-time challenges when it comes to HMRC deadlines. Maybe you're using a specific type of tax filing software and there's some issues with errors, or where do I find the button for this, or even how to treat certain claim data, specific accounting treatment of certain claim data that as we're not accountants, we're not always best placed to give you that advice. So it's a really nice, safe, friendly space for people to ask questions, and you can be as active or inactive as you like. We have many customers that are really great at jumping in when there's questions, and we know that there's others that just like to quietly observe. So it's there for you to be able to absorb information and get help and advice as and when you need to. And we also do use it as a place to share things like app updates and maybe post if we've maybe got a new blog out that we think might be useful for you to read, or new ebooks and guides and things like that. So we will dip in and out every now and again just to give you some messages from our side. And of course, if there's a question that is left unanswered, we'll always try and jump in and either encourage somebody else to jump in who's more knowledgeable on a certain aspect than we might be, or we'll obviously answer the question for you as well. So if you're not already a member, as I said, drop us a message after this and we'll get you involved. And as I said, you don't have to be active if you don't want to, but it could be a useful resource there for you. So that leads us on to the Q&A, and you're all being very quiet. It may just be that you've got no questions to ask, or we've just given you so much information you're a bit overwhelmed and you don't know what on earth you want to ask us. But certainly, as Jen mentioned earlier on, it would be great if we can have some feedback from you guys in the upcoming weeks and months as we move the app forward and try and get it into an even better shape to do offer it and provide as much value to you guys as we can. We will be, I'm just trying to wait to see if anybody's got any questions on, so just to let you know, we will be sending a follow-up from today's session out. It'll probably be tomorrow or Friday now, with a recording, so an on-demand recording, so you can catch up on anything that Jen's gone through specifically. That's probably the more intricate, detailed bits and pieces of some of the changes, and also any resources as well. Thank you very much for your message there, Louise. I'm glad that was useful. If anybody does have any questions, let us know. If anybody wants to raise their hand and ask anything, let us know. And if not, we'll be very happy to leave you to go back to your lunch breaks and continue on with your day. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. It's been lovely to present today to you all. And we'll be into. Oh, Ross, did you raise your hand? Can I find Ross in the list? If you want to ask a question there, Ross. Oh, Jen, my participants aren't opening up. Oh, there we go.
It's okay. I think he just wanted to give us a thumbs up.
Okay.
A raised hand.
Well, thank you so much. Okay, well, we'll leave you to it. Thanks, everyone. We'll be in touch, and just keep an eye out on your inboxes and again on the group and things like that. If there's anything that you want or need, we are here to help. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will speak to you soon.